Now, I was fortunate enough to have someone who had 30 years under his belt, who knew whatever these numbers I was plugging in, if they made sense or not. Because those projections require a lot of math and knowledge and history, business history. And so I would go to him and, you have to apply like the square footage of your space. A lot of it was like assumption, because at that point I still didn't even have a space, right? But I knew what my budget was, because I knew how much money I had in the bank, how much I had in that shoebox under the bed. And that dictated what type of space I was looking for, what my rent was going to be. Georgie was able to give me the math on how much I had to spend, how much I had to profit from. That added to how much or how big the space had to be, dictating how much rent I could afford. It became so complicated. Wow. But this man held my hand throughout that whole process.
And how are you guys now? You guys are still...
Of course.
Every time.
I mean, me and him, we're still cool. I think my second year open, I kind of wanted to go back and give him his flowers. Oh. And so I took, again, we do a retreat every 2 years with my staff, and they decide what they want to do. And so one year they wanted to go to Billy's, because I had spoken so much about like this mega sports bar that I worked at and my experiences there and how much fun I had. And it was a great opportunity for them to see what they were doing on another level and where you could really take being in the service industry. And the fun that you could have at the same time if you really applied yourself. And so we went. And they were just in awe. Really? Wow. And I got to introduce them to Georgie, the man with the master plan. Right. And, my plan was to go there, spend a lot of money, not have a budget. We went to a Yankees game after that, by the way, which was amazing. And just spend my, just give back. Give back. Right. And goddamn Georgie. The server comes back. I give the credit card, and it's all paid for. And he told me next time.
Amen.
Let me tell you something. Beautiful. Yeah. Let me tell you something. That when it comes to like listening to your story just now, it just allowed me to tap into certain things. And one of those things is when you're working with people, and when people are loyal to you, and you give back, the level of respect, honor, loyalty, service that is provided is incredible. So the great example is when I went to your restaurant. Who's that Spanish dude that's really funny?
Brian.
Shout out to Brian.
Brian's such an amazing.
Brian's a busboy, barback extraordinaire. Now he's been promoted, so he's a server.
Yes, and, Brian.
We're all about creating opportunities.
Always smiling, and having a good time.
leveling up our staff.
So his customer service is organic.
And so the reason why I bring him up, not that I knew his name per se, but
you remember him.
But I remember him. And I remember him because of the way that he just seemed naturally happy. He
has never met you before, but when he engages with you, it's like he's met you before.
Exactly.
And that's customer service, because that connection is like welcoming and is endearing, and that's just part of who he is, his personality.
Right.
But you can tell he's really present with what he does.
Right.
And I've seen the growth.
And now it connects with what you're talking about because it's an extension.
Right? I mean, one of the primary goals of the hospitality industry is creating experiences. Restaurants are a dime a dozen in New York City.
Oh, absolutely.
I think there's like upwards of 65,000 restaurants and bars in New York.
Never thought about that.
So, when you open, you're really a guppy in a fish tank and in a shark tank, rather. Because we're talking New York City. We're not talking like Ohio. And so, you got one time and one time only to make a first impression. Right? First impressions don't come more than once.
Absolutely.
And you have 3 seconds in New York City to make an impression on people walking by or people coming into your restaurant. The hardest part about the restaurant industry is getting people through your door. So that was something that we learned really early on. I think we opened in October of 2018, and we didn't get our first customer until 6 weeks after we opened.
Wow.
I opened up in Chelsea, Manhattan, one of the most expensive zip codes in New York City. I mean,
Sophie, where was the first location located?
Originally, we opened our first counter and bodega on 23rd Street between 8th and 9th. So we're talking 10 blocks away from Times Square. On a main pipeline in New York City.
Mm-hmm.
So I try to think of that, like, all right, so you open up your restaurant, you know, and you quickly want to see it get filled, right? The expectations, but then week 1 passes, week 2 passes, week 5, and you're like,
yeah, because by week 3 you're like, oh, hey, good, like we still got some time to settle in. Right. We're still moving furniture around. We're still, perfecting our menu.
Yeah.
We have a lot of family coming through.
Yeah.
So when I say customers, I mean like
outsiders,
outside people, outsiders, strangers. Now a month goes by. I'm like, okay. Like I'm outside, like and the train's on the corner.
Right.
We're cushioned between the A train and the 1 train.
Right.
We're 5 doors down from the Chelsea Hotel, one of the most historic hotels in the world. And nobody's coming through. And I'm like, whoa.
And what was the breaking point? When did it just like
build up?
Well, real quick, I want to shout out to my partner, Richie A.
Woo, Richie!
Thank God for Richie, because had it not been for him, actually, my anxiety was out the roof, right? We had put all our money, all our life savings.
Wow.
Right. After we finished that business plan, and we're coming up on like a year and 6 months now, between the time that I started plugging in all the answers to the business plan to the time Georgie said, all right, now it's time to go find your space.
Wow.
With the mindset of location. And when we found our location and we were able to negotiate a rent that made sense for our budget, and it wound up being in Midtown Manhattan, right? Not in a side street in Brooklyn,
right? Exactly.
Not in right.
Interesting. Yeah.
I mean, it couldn't have been a more desirable location and space.
Right.
Absolutely.
Right.
I was next to a movie theater. I was cushioned in between, some major franchises. I was like, what the hell did we do? Like, we are in over our heads. And now 6 weeks passed by. And his name is Doug. To this day, he's still one of our biggest supporters. Doug, we love you. He's family to us now. He came in. Old school Italian guy from Brooklyn.
Oh, wow.
He had just moved to Manhattan. He lived around the corner. And, I remember his story saying, I was walking by and I seen bodega. Counter and bodega. And at the time, our awning had looked just like a bodega.
Right.
That was the
White
idea.
And black, right?
So for a long time within those 6 weeks, we had people coming in like, hey, can I get a pack of cigarettes? I need some milk. And it was like that was the question, and then like 2 seconds they looking around like, what the fuck is this? And we had tables in a bar and high stools and shit like that. And he was like, so Doug walks in. And in his animated self, he introduced himself and he, welcomed us to the neighborhood. And he was like, let's try this food out, and let's see what you guys got. And, when I'm in my element, I have to toot my own horn. I mean,
amen.
My experience as a social worker gave me a huge amount of insight in how to deal with people. So I for sure had those tools. And I also, if you want to be in this industry, you have to innately have a certain personality. You gotta be a little bit of a sociopath, because the hospitality industry will make or break you. And you really have to be built for it. And you have to understand people. And so he tried our food, and we just kind of mutually fell in love with each other. And from that day, he brought one person, and that person told another person, and that person told another person. And the word of mouth went off like wildfire. And that was the beginning of the success of Count and Bodega. And here we are. Yes. 6 years later, we just made our 6-year anniversary on October 31st. We celebrate it every year on October 31st, or at least that weekend of Halloween.
Yeah.
And we're here to stay.
I love it.
And we're very proud of what we've achieved in all these years. And it didn't come with a lot of trial and error. And COVID really was an eye opener for us, because just when you think, I signed a lease, right? You sign a lease. And in that lease, right? So I'm a first time entrepreneur. You know, you read through this lease, you have your lawyers read through the lease, and you kind of go through it with a fine tooth comb. And there's a clause in every single lease. It's called a boilerplate lease, right? And then you have like an appendix to it, whatever else that you and the landlord agreed to. Mm-hmm. But in that boiler lease template, there's a clause that says something to the effect of, you agree to pay rent in the event of anything, catastrophes, war. It didn't say pandemic, but it's basically like a zombie clause. Like, you're signing this saying that even if we experience apocalypse, all goes to hell, you're going to pay my rent.
Right.
Now, I signed this shit like hell. There was nothing that was going to stop me.
Right.
I had my back up against the wall, and I knew that you have to have that mentality as an entrepreneur. That's why I say you're a little bit of a sociopath, a little bit of a narcissist, because you're like, I'm not going to fail. I have all this experience. I got all these people rooting for me. I got all the support. This is going to be easy. I just have to be mindful of like my financing, my budgeting, right? But I had already learned that, right? I had Georgie. I had my partner who had also experience in the business for semi-years. So I signed this lease, 2018. 2020 comes. What happened in 2020?
Fucking the world shifted.
Every 100 years?
Right.
So we get all this, we get this notice that, this disease, this thing is happening. And, we just think, all right, this is a flash in the pan. It's like the flu. I don't know. What could possibly be as bad as 9/11? COVID.
Right.
So now March 15th, we close. Everything shuts down. I'm like, all right, cool. My partner, God bless his soul, he's like, well, I guess we have some time to go on vacation.
Go Richie.
Richie.
Go Richie. I went to Hawaii.
At the idea, I laugh at it. I take it as a grain of salt. And he's literally like on his phone, like at the bar, planning a vacation to Hawaii. I'm like, Richie, we need to save every single penny that we have right now and prepare for the worst. So we had thought about Hawaii maybe like 5 years before. It was like a $10,000 trip for like 10 days, round trip, 5-star hotel. So we had to put that on the back burner because obviously we were opening up a restaurant. And he shows me the total. Now, mind you, clearly, like flights had decreased exponentially. So our 3-week stay in Hawaii, this is what I mean about like balancing life and keeping that mantra of life is too short to be anything amazing. Because what else can you do during an epidemic, right? You just stay home and wallow in your sorrow. Yeah, not Richie. He's on another level. So he shows me the phone and he's like, how about for this price? $1,800.
For 3 weeks.
3 weeks.
Round trip.
2 round trip. 5-star hotel.
Wow.
Look at that.
So March 15th, we close. We clear out our walk-in. We clear our inventory. We put everything out on the street. We give it away. Turn off all the electricity. Shut down the restaurant. And on March 18th, we were on a flight to Hawaii.
Wow.
And we spent 3 weeks there. And it was the most amazing 3 weeks. For whatever it was worth, the pandemic provided us with opportunities that we would have never had. Time off.
Wow.
Following that we would have never had otherwise.
Right.
Funny how you mentioning that. Was it that time of reflection, or was it a time of?
It was a time of gathering. For he and I to reconnect, and we needed that because what happened once we got back was the real struggle, was the real challenge. Everything before that was smooth sailing compared to what challenges the pandemic put in front of us when we got back and we had to reopen under such restrictions.
Yeah.
How did you survive through it? I'm like, what? Like,
I feel it's impressive. Right, because when you came back, right, you were in Florida for a minute, you came back, you reopened, but during that time, was there still a time of curfew? There was so much like takeout. Could you still dine in? The hand sanitizing, there was so many health regulations and everything like that.
Right,
those things definitely can challenge your influx of customers. So how did you?
Yeah, it limited everything.
Right, it limited everything. So
well, I'm a hustler. I'm from Brooklyn.
Yes.
What I'm about to say, if anybody's watching this, heed my words. Sometimes you have to do when you're not supposed to do.
Oh.
And it's all about taking risks. Now, within limitation, right?
Right.
So we closed on March 15th. We spent 3 weeks in Hawaii, lived our best lives. And then we were just thinking of coming back. And people were like, don't come back. We're still 3 weeks in and it's just getting worse.
Right.
Right. We're hearing stories about what was going on out here in the world. What was going on in the hospitals. And then we had a curfew also. And so at that point, we still weren't allowed to reopen. But the government was providing these grants, which was called the PPP, which most people know about. And so I do my due diligence. Anybody tells me I'm going to get free money for my business, I'm going for it. So the way that the government rolled out that program was they gave priority to female business owners, minority business owners, and veterans. So I made I checked off 2 of that criteria. So Monday morning, the portals opened up, and it opened up at 7 in the morning. At 6:30 in the morning, I made sure I had all my paperwork. I had already done my research as to what was going to be required to complete this application because I knew that money was going to go within hours. And so I applied. And we got the first round of PPPs. The PPP, there were 2 rounds of it. So there was one in March and then another one way later, like I think maybe the following year in February, because we're still closed to indoor dining. So we applied for it, and it was so minimal, the money, because they used a certain calculation, like however many staff you had times whatever the number was how much money they granted you. And you had 2 options. You can either use the money for rent or you could use the money to pay salary. Now, I was savvy enough in understanding what I had signed in terms of my lease. And I had, again, really good people behind me. So my realtor, when we were creating the lease, and what we wanted from the landlord as opposed to what he wanted, he put this clause in the lease, which is called a good guy clause. And that clause basically says that if I am up to date on my rent and I give you, regardless of how long my lease term is, 10, 15 years, 5 years, if I'm up to date in my lease and my rent, right, payment, that if I give you 3 months notice, I could walk away from that lease. Now, a lot of people don't know about that. But again, God is good. I'm a God-fearing woman. And he put this realtor in my space to help me have a successful restaurant and get through these kinds of things and navigate through like this whole process.